I was told I had 9 months to live, and I had a son who was just 2 years old. And I remember that night thinking to myself that I was diagnosed. All through my life, people had told me who I am and who I should be and what I couldn't do, and I'd never listened to any of them. So I wasn't going to listen to a doctor telling me I had 9 months to live. Well, it was a space of 35 years. But I grew up in a council house, 2 up, 2 down, left school at 14, 15 years old, not as smart as all of you. But I started this, the only thing I knew how to do was make face creams, and I had a very creative upbringing. So when I first started my very first tiny little business, the only thing I knew how to do was to make face creams from a kitchen with 4 plastic jugs and a saucepan. And Gary, my husband, Gary's here tonight, Gary and I started out, we were only just married, 21, 22 years old, rented this tiny apartment in Chelsea. We had no money for furniture, we had no bed, no curtains, absolutely nothing. We had a piece of blue foam from Homebase, that was our bed. And then every day I would get up and would transfer this little flat into a shop. I had 20 clients to begin with, and then 50, then 100, then 500, then 1,000. And as each woman would leave, having her face done, because I was a therapist, I would give her this tiny little bottle of bath oil that I'd made, and that bath oil was nutmeg and ginger. And it wasn't in a smart little bottle, it was a funny little glass bottle with a Pronto print label and no ingredient listing. H&R, the ingredients and all the legal people would have gone absolutely crazy because there was nothing that ticked a box. And one lady bought 100 bottles one day, and that was the birth of a company. There's always a moment in a small business where you come to a crossroads, and that was mine. I think where we come from, our backgrounds are so what make us. I believe nothing is wasted in life. My upbringing was tough though. It wasn't, I mean, I think everybody, when they hear me being interviewed and I say I grew up on an estate, they imagine Downton Abbey. It really wasn't. It was more like EastEnders. And it was a little council house. But from the age of 11 years old, it was up to me to put food on our table. So I was the one with the smart head. I had 2 very creative parents who I adored, and I didn't want to let them down. But in all fairness to them, they let me down a lot. But my dad was a brilliant artist, and he was also a member of the Magic Circle. So he was a magician, and he was also a great gambler. And as a little girl, the 3 things I followed him were, number 1, I would do the markets with him, where I would go and set up the market stall early in the morning. And my mum would say to me as we left, "Jo, if you don't sell a painting this weekend, there's nothing in the food, in the larder or the fridge." And so I would learn how to sell paint. I mean, you think about it, 11-year-old kid standing in a market stall selling paintings. And we would set up early in the morning, and I'd send him off to go and get a cup of coffee or something. And I'd sell the first painting before he came back and pocket the money, so I knew we could eat. And then I was also the magician's assistant. So I was the Debbie McGee, and I knew how white rabbits came out of hats and things. But I think that, you know, our upbringings are so much part of who we are, and sometimes people run away from who they are. Don't do that. Allow it, embrace it, allow it to be part of you. And even if it's a tough upbringing, you can always spin it and turn it round and make life a very, very different place. So I used my 2 very creative parents. My mum was creative and worked for Revlon, and then went to work for the Countess Labati, who was an incredible character. And that's where I learned to make face creams. So all of the things I learned in my childhood, I learned to be a shopkeeper in the marketplace. I learned to entertain, being a magician, and I learned how to make face creams with Madame Labati. So nothing was wasted. So both Gary and I built that. I always get the credit, and poor Gary just sits in the background, and he is really, put your hand up, Gary. He's going to hate it. No, he's not going to put his hand up. Gary and I built that together. So we were 2 young kids that knew nothing about retail, nothing about being shopkeepers, And let me tell you, in your dreams and your aspirations, don't let other people's opinions dictate who you are. You're entitled to your dreams and your aspirations. And he and I we didn't set out to build a global brand by any means. We set out to survive. So we went step by step, and when we opened Little Wharton Street, it took all our money. We never borrowed a penny. We would work all day doing one job, and then in the evening we would set about trying to create a shop. And when we opened 154 Wharton Street, it was incredible, I can't tell you. From day one, so we opened the doors on day one of Wharton Street, and this man walks in from New York, and he'd flown in, and he offered me $1 million to sell my company that day. I haven't even been trading 24 hours, hadn't even shut the door.
Were you tempted? Or?
I wasn't tempted, actually. No, and you know, but I did think, I could buy a double bed. Yeah. That was the first thought in my head, but I think we set out and we grew every single day, and our little pool of money that we had to go into PR or marketing or building a team got smaller and smaller, and the world was suddenly wanting our product. So we were finding our sales were going through the roof, but also the expenses. So if you go and open in a new territory, it's not just opening a site and putting a team there, you need all of the backup to make it work. And so we were running out of money, and we knew at some point that we either had to slow down the growth of a business, and that's always a really delicate moment, because it's, do I slow it down to keep up with it, or do I carry on running with it? And if we carried on running with it, so did we sell a part? Did we sell equity? What did we do? Did we sell a franchise? And it was when Leonard Lauder walked into the shop one day. So he was the son of Estee Lauder. And I remember standing there thinking, I could feel my knees knocking under the counter, because I knew who he was when he walked in. And he said, I'd like to acquire your company. And listen, when you're two kids from a council estate with nothing, and suddenly the greatest global giant walks into your store, into your four walls, and says, I want to purchase your company. So it was. It took us about 18 months to negotiate. It was tough negotiations there and back, and we sold. And so we sold our business, I think, in 99. Yeah. Well, when I sold Jo Malone and we did the deal, it was forever. You know, I was 38 years old, honestly, and my life went from running around. I mean, I'm still I think I'm a very down-to-earth person. I like being working class. I mean, I kind of still consider myself to be that kind of person, and I still like going to work. But my life changed drastically within 6 months, and suddenly I had teams of people to do everything from create a product to choose a lid for a bottle. And Gary and I had done all of that ourselves. We'd sort of done every part of our business. And I went to shoot a brochure in New York with this incredible photographer called Chris Baker. And Chris was teaching me to look down the lens of a camera and bring a picture to life. And I was learning. I was kind of all of the learning that I hadn't done as a child. I was suddenly in this world where I was learning at a rate of knots, and I loved it. But I felt really tired the whole time, and went back, and a curved ball came from nowhere that I didn't anticipate. And I was diagnosed with cancer and given 9 months to live. So the reason I left Jo Malone was I'd fought cancer for a whole year, and I was one of the first women to take chemotherapy every 5 days for a whole year. I came through it, but I was a very different person, and that was why I decided to step down. It was, I've learned more about the person I am in the last 10 years. And I think a lot of people say that. When you come through really dark times, when you come through the other end, you really learn about who you truly are. And the chemotherapy, I was told I had 9 months to live, and I had a son who was just 2 years old. And I remember that night thinking to myself that I was diagnosed. All through my life, people had told me who I am and who I should be and what I couldn't do, and I'd never listened to any of them. So I wasn't going to listen to a doctor telling me I had 9 months to live, but I knew I had to approach cancer in the same way that I'd approached a business, which is I had to find my own way. But halfway through chemo, I had reacted so badly, so I was in intensive care every 10 days, in isolation every month, And it took my sense of smell, because you're on really strong drugs. I was on adriamycin, Cytoxin, Taxol, Taxotere. I mean, you name it, they pumped it into me. And it worked, by the way, it worked. So it was worth every single second. But all I could taste was metal, all I could smell was aluminium. And when I came through the chemotherapy and my hair started to come back, my sense of smell didn't. And I'm horribly dyslexic. And I also have something called synesthesia. So when you remove a sense from somebody that is so predominant in their life, my sense of smell is like my guide. I didn't know who I was. So I'd lost my best friend, I'd lost my purpose, I'd lost my identity, and I suddenly felt that cancer had taken my hair and my body, but it had also taken my spirit. And I had to really find and really strive and climb a mountain again to find who I really was.
Yeah, and I think you can really see that when you're reading your book, your sense of, you kind of get a sense of the smell that comes out of every experience you've had, that you associate with things. So you really get a sense that that is, I think you've described it as your paintbrush before, something that you sort of...
My nose is my paintbrush, I paint life and emotion and feeling with the sense of smell the whole time. So that the chemotherapy, I mean, if I could tell anyone that's going through it now, is just be patient, because your senses do come back. And in fact, my sense of smell has come back so powerfully and so strongly, but it took a good year for that to come back. But of course, I changed my life in the period of time that I thought everything had gone. And in fact, it was just, I just needed to wait for a little bit of time. No, I'm not about regrets in life. I think the things that we do, the mistakes, and we're people who, what we have to realize is that we're human beings. People make mistakes, they make wrong turns. We don't have crystal ball, and how boring would life be if we didn't have any of those kind of things? So when I walked away, I remember so vividly that day walking away from Jo Malone and the run up to it. When you've sold to a big corporation for a lot of money, which I did, I had a 5-year lockout. And I remember that last day walking away, and I knew I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. And I was the only one. I didn't even tell Gary. I was just sitting there thinking, what am I going to do? I've got to try and grapple it back. And it was too late. All the deeds were signed. The press release had gone out globally. Estee Lauder had come and given me a big dinner and given me a necklace. And it was like, ooh. And I said, please, can I be the last person to turn the key in the lock on that last day? And I remember walking around Sloane Street, putting all the bottles on the shelf and turning the key, and I sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and thought, I will never live again, I will never. But I have. Yes. I have, and if I hadn't done that, and when you look back, do I regret selling? No. Do I regret selling to Estee Lauder? No. Do I regret selling my name? No. But the way I did it, if I had it again today, boy, would I do it differently.
Did do it differently.
And I think any entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, will tell you the same. You learn from your mistakes, from your last business. So I would sell it very differently today, but I don't have any regrets at all doing that. Failure is part of life, and failure is part of success. And I think at this moment in time in our country, we are so terrified to admit failure and even fail. And you know what? Some of the greatest things that have happened in our time have come through people failing. I mean, penicillin, sitting on a shelf, and it was something that passed somebody by. And I don't know, just so many things in my life that the mistakes I've made have caused me to either remove myself from the situation because I didn't want to be part of it, which is a learning lesson, change the situation or change the way I think about something. And the things that have changed me most as a person are the things where I've changed my mindset, because I've accepted the situation for what it is, but I've looked at it differently, and I've gone round. And I think at the time that our country is going through, we need to realise that everyone's using this word resilience in the last month. It's really funny. It's popped into newspapers. Piers Morgan on Breakfast TV is suddenly talking about resilience. And resilience is one of those great ingredients that means warrior to me, because it means you've stood, you've fought, you've conquered, you've moved on. Resilience is a vital ingredient to the next, I believe, certainly the next decade in this country. And resilience only comes through tough times. So don't be frightened of them. Sometimes they're unpleasant. They're not things that we want to embrace. but go with it and carry on. And sometimes stand still in a situation. It's not always about walking forward and conquering. Sometimes, and even if you retreating is not being defeated. That's part of resilience. So sometimes you need to step back, sometimes you need to stand your ground and say, no, I'll stand until this passes, because tough times always pass. They're not forever. But that's when we need to be united as a group and as a country or a business, and you stand together. And as a young business in Jo Loves at the moment, we've really struggled. Not so much in business, but finding our team, finding who we are. And there's been times where we've just had to stand still and literally hold on to each other and say, okay, this will pass, and it always does. It was beyond daunting, and it was a wholly different experience. So I remember sitting back around the kitchen table and saying to my family, and my son at the time was 11, and I just couldn't bear being away from fragrance any longer. And I know that sounds crazy to some people. To musicians it doesn't, to writers, because if you take away the one thing that they can do brilliantly, and making fragrance is the one thing I can do, I think, better than anyone in the world. So you take that away, and who am I? Who am I? So I thought, I've got to try. Even if I fail, I've got to try. So we sat down, we worked out how we were going to do it, and we had to be very respectful of the brand that was there. And I had no idea the minefield I was about to walk, because there was Jo Malone, the cream and black box, I was Jo Malone, and then I was Jo Malone, Jo Loves, and Jo Loves and Jo Malone. And it was, oh my goodness. And the legal team turn around and say, the consumer can't be confused. And it's like, the consumer can't be confused? I'm really confused. Who am I? Am I cream and black? Am I red? Am I white with a red dot? But I was still Jo. I was still the person. And I do think that the legal system, and certainly when you acquire brands with names, the legal system is realizing that young people are selling their businesses faster. They're not handing them to the next generation like Cadbury's or Schweppes or things like that. It's people are selling their businesses connected with their names, but they still have the right to continue to be the person, even if they can't trade in that category. So starting out again was a whole different experience. I was also 25 years older, and it was a different world. I mean, social media wasn't even around when we started out. You did things in a very sort of, you wrote a press release on a piece of paper, you sent it off, and you waited 6 weeks to see if it was printed. The legislation and the rules that we have had changed completely. So it was a whole different experience. I had to learn from scratch, and I made more mistakes in that first year, and it was like standing on this really public stage in my underwear. Your worst nightmare, your worst dream, and I had to let it go. I had to sort of ride with it and see it through the other end. Yeah, but we made some really horrible mistakes. No, it's my imagination. That's always where it starts for me. I imagine, and rather like if you're writing a story or writing a piece of music, I hear fragrance in my head. So I see colour. So that lady's blue jacket, everyone is seeing turquoise in that jacket. I'm smelling hyacinth with green leaves, and it's very natural. So my sense is that the red chair we're sitting on, I'm smelling the leather of a horse saddle and wild thyme, because I ride horses, and my memory is taking me back to the moment where I sit in a horse saddle and I'm up in the mountains. So my senses start with my imagination. I create a story, and it's often something that's really happening to me. So my fragrances, whether they be Jo Malone or they be Jo Loves or whatever I'm going on to, I'm telling you a story of my life. I'm telling you where I was. I was on the beach in Parrot Key. I was riding horses in the mountains in Montana. I was sitting in a bar in New York City watching a bartender. So I'm telling you stories continually about my life, and that's where it starts for me. Oh, there's so many. We made such a terrible mistake with packaging. So if you look in the book, I wrote a book, there's a picture of me standing on our opening day at Selfridges with a pop-up, and everything is red, it's this colour. And I looked at it, and I remember that night it all being put together, and it was the first time the world was going to see Jo Loves. And I was in Selfridges, it was 4 o'clock in the morning because we were building the store overnight to open the next day, and all the world press were coming to see us. And I looked at the shop going up and thought, oh my God, I hate it. And I just knew it. My gut was like, why did you choose red, Jo? And it was all dark and it was very masculine and it was very harsh. So I went to the bathroom about 4:30 in the morning in Selfridges, came down the escalator, and as I came down, right in front of me was the cream and black box. And I heard this brand say to me, oh my God, what have you done? And I was facing the brand that I built and sold, and I looked to my right to see the brand that I was just about to launch. And I knew it was wrong. I knew the packaging. What I knew was right, what was in those bottles: pomelo, gardenia, green orange and coriander, pink vetiver. I knew that was right. And so it took us about 2 years, and we then had to go back and rebrand. Now the brand is all white. It's got a Union Jack imprinted into it and a little red dot that signifies, because I red dot things when things are approved. So now we got it all right. But sometimes when you build a business, you get it wrong. It's okay. It's okay. You just have to work through that process. And sometimes it feels incredibly humiliating. And anyway, there was one other story which I think I'll share with you. You're either going to laugh or not enjoy this one. But it was our opening morning. And we had spent a lot of money registering Jo Loves, because we knew that the minute the world heard I had another brand, territories would be bought up and we would be prevented from trading. So we had to invest, I think, something like £500,000 across the world before we had sold one bottle of fragrance. So I had to really make sure this was what I wanted. And we'd spent months building. We had done a big article for Vogue, and Wall Street were running a big story as well. So there we were going to push the button on Jo Loves. Gary comes up 6:30 in the morning and he brings me a cup of tea and he said, there's good news and bad news. And I said, what do you mean there's good news and bad news? And he said, the good news is Vogue are running with the story. And I went, what's the bad news? And he said, I don't know how this has happened, but I've just Googled Jo Loves, and on the top of the Google list is a vibrator. Oh, thank God you laughed. If you had been quiet, I was really going to walk out that door there. And it was, and you don't know me well enough, I'm the biggest prude on the face of this earth. And I, what do you mean? What do you mean? Google it. And he goes, well, every time you Google it, it puts it even higher up the list. And it's like, and I was absolutely mortified. And it had slipped through the net, and we hadn't seen it. And on that top of that list, so I knew the way the world was going to wake up and go, Jo Loves. Oh my God, what is Jo doing? And it was awful. It was awful. Anyway, the long and short of it is, we decided we'd push the button, we carry on, and we had to go through that. And the guy concerned, by the way, please don't Google him, because it just drives me nuts, because it puts him up the Google list again. And
did it boost his sales?
He wanted money, and I went, no. If we pay him money, we'll do that for the rest of our life. We have to win this with creativity, and that's what we did. We were creative and creative and creative and creative. And now, you know, Jo Loves is right up there. I think coming back and building again, I think I'm brave. I think I'm a warrior, and you know, I have this thing: never quit on a bad day, because you never quit on a good day. And there's been moments in the last 2 years I wanted to quit, without a doubt. When that came through that morning, it was a really awful day. I had pitched for something that, because I feel I'm so much more than a bottle of fragrance, and I know there's something more within me. And I pitched for this particular project, and I'd come in second, and I was mortified and hurt. And I went back home, and I just wanted to cry. And I saw on the kitchen table a letter from Downing Street that said open immediately, and I thought, oh, now what? Opened it, and I read this, and it says, you know, Her Majesty the Queen would love to honour you with a CBE. And I promise you, I thought, this has come to the wrong person. And I was just about to pick up the phone, and as I read it, I realised it was for me, and I felt so humbled. And the minute I mean, a CBE is, I still can't believe it. I'm going to get it on the 16th of November. I go to Buckingham Palace to receive it. And I remember thinking, this is for my country. I have to now do something really great. And I think I know what it is. I have to do something for my country, because this isn't just for what I've done. This is something I have to do to change the way it is for others. And I feel really, really honoured to be receiving that.
And we were talking about what that was before, but would you like to sort of share that with the audience?
One of the things, I mean, I will continue to be a shopkeeper. I've been a shopkeeper 25 years next year, and I will continue to build and encourage other small businesses. But last summer, my son's 17, he's so smart. I don't know how he's our son, but he is, and his heart is set either to come to somewhere like Oxford to further his education. But he was with a whole group of young people who were getting their grades. Josh got straight A stars all the way through, and so did 3 of his friends, but 2 didn't. And one of them was left with grades where I saw this young man just become a shadow of who I'd seen 24 hours before. He felt he was second class. I remember having the conversation. And I felt this is terribly wrong in our country today, that children, young people who have tried their best but are not academic, either where they came from or their backgrounds, whatever it is. And I've decided that I was going to do something about the people who felt they were second class, because I certainly felt that as a child. And so hopefully from January 2020, when the national curriculum changes, and we're going to have a segment in it that is part of the health and wellness program, I am trying desperately hard, and I would love to open up this is opening up a conversation. And if you disagree with me, I don't mind you disagreeing with me either. But from the ages of 7 to 17, I believe our young people deserve to learn in the national curriculum how and what it takes to be an entrepreneur. We need to teach them to build, how to build a business, how to build a product, how to build themselves, and for it to be part of the national curriculum. Do you know, within 5 years, we will see a generation of young people that come through every school across our country that will know how to build regardless of their qualifications. And we can take that generation, equip them and build them. And this generation deserve it. We as entrepreneurs who have come through really tough times, and creators and founders, need to pick up those pieces, put them together and hand them and say, we will help you build. But it needs to be part of the national curriculum. And that is what I am going to stand in Downing Street, and I'm going to stand in front of the House and anywhere that gives me a voice until it changes in our country.